Are you looking to get more into dungeons in Destiny 2? Well, dungeons in Destiny 2 are 3-man activities that are kind of like raids, but with simpler mechanics and not quite the pressure to stay alive that you have in raids. They're good opportunities to kind of step into raid mechanics without having to find 6 people and coordinating everyone's playtime plus their dog's playtime plus their wife's, right? It's pretty easy to get 3 people, and those activities also are not that difficult once you get better to actually solo and complete them yourselves. In this video, I'm going to go over how to get into dungeons even if you're someone who struggles with PvE. This is an activity that you can get into and be successful at. The first thing you probably need to learn is about survivability. Now, survivability is something that if you're just playing casual activities, you don't really have to worry about this that much. And for dungeons, it's not quite as bad as when you're in raids, but you do need to make sure that you are paying attention to survivability. When you pay attention to survivability, that's where builds are going to become more important, and you're also going to need to think about your resilience. Your resilience allows you, especially if it gets close to 100, to basically tank damage as it's coming in. Builds are also important because you can use different abilities within builds to help you stay alive longer. On your hunter, you can go invisible. On your warlock, you can get healing. On your titan, you can become a little bit tankier or put things up to shield you. So becoming survivable is really important. To try this out for the first time, probably the first thing I'd recommend is going to Legend and Master Lost sectors. These are easy activities that allow you to go in solo by yourself. These activities also, as you complete them by yourselves, will allow you to actually get the exotics that you might need to do some of these dungeon and endgame PvE activities. One of the key things you're going to notice with Legend and Master Lost sectors is that everything kind of spawns in the same areas that they do normally. So as you go in, there's always the same enemies spawning in certain areas. There's always the same champions. If you've never dealt with champions, this is a good opportunity to deal with them. Champions require different abilities or different guns to be able to actually stun them. So it is a good opportunity to start allowing yourself to kind of dip your toe into what endgame looks like. Since you're by yourself too, you're kind of relying on yourself. If you die, then you die. You have limited revive timer in there too. So if you die so many times, you actually wipe out the activity. So it's a really good thing. In this case, you also then can start to treat PvE like PvP. And what I mean by that is as you're going to the Lost sector, you actually need to start thinking, should I take cover here? Should I back off because I'm in a bad situation? You know, generally when you're in PvE activity, especially on planets or free roam or things like that, you're not really thinking about that. In this case, with limited survivability, with playing by yourself, you actually have to think about, I need to plan this out and make sure I'm thinking through what I'm doing in the activity. Once you complete this, then that's when I would try to go to Nightfalls. Nightfalls at lower levels are pretty simple, but Nightfalls at Master and Legend, and eventually at Grandmaster, can be very challenging. This is also something where you can first try the match-made version of the Nightfalls, the lower levels. In the lower level versions, it gives you a good opportunity to, without Mike, be able to learn where everything spawns. The champions and everything else are still going to spawn in the same areas. When they get to higher levels, you're just more limited about what your level is versus the enemy. You're also going to be limited in what you can do as far as champions, as far as stunning. There's different modifiers, so there's things that are going to become increasingly more difficult. But if you get into the Nightfalls at first, and you kind of go in and say, okay, now I'm in this Nightfall, now I know where the enemies spawn, I know some of the strategies to deal with them, and as you're going into these activities of other players, you can start to learn from their strategies. I've found my most effective Nightfall runs have been typically when I've learned from players that I couldn't even talk to, because, you know, one of the things when you're doing that, you have to kind of sometimes have to back off a little bit and watch what they're doing and let them lead. Once you begin to get a little bit more comfortable, that's where you can start trying to actually get in with actual players. So that's where you're going to have to go in and try to actually communicate with people. And that's, again, more when you get to the Legend and even Grandmaster. And Grandmaster, if you want to try it, is a good opportunity to kind of get challenged and make sure you're comfortable for really endgame activities. So now that we're talking about connecting with people, let's talk about that a little bit more. So there's lots of ways to find people in Destiny to play with. There are a ton of Discords, including my own. You can join that. Feel free. But there's plenty of Discords out there where you can join, and you can actually find people to play with. Typically on those Discords, they'll also have a Discord chat channel where you can use it. It's a little more reliable than Bungie Chat. You can still use Bungie Chat, but it's a good way to find other people to play with. You can also find a clan. In a clan, Obviously, clans are more difficult to find, and I would just be careful that you make sure as you're getting in clans that you guys have aligned what you want to do. You know, some clans are clans where it's as simple as a Facebook Messenger group where people are just randomly saying, hey, when do you want to join up? There's other clans that are very strict about when you show up because maybe they're part of a family and maybe they have other responsibilities. Again, kind of like part-time guardians. So just make sure when you join for a clan that you know exactly what the tendency of the clan is, and you can tell pretty quick if they're going to be toxic or not toxic. The other thing with LFG is you can use the in-game LFG tool, Firefinder tool now, to actually connect with people. So that's a good opportunity. You can say whether you want to be on mic or off mic. Obviously, as you get more difficult competition, you're going to have to be off mic. And then finally, you can also go to Reddit. There are some fire teams in Reddit, fire teams that you can actually, ask and see if you can join people. But again, those are some of the ways you can do that. As you're looking to do that, some of the things you need to keep in mind is there's certain acronyms that will tell you whether you want to get in this group or not. There's KWTD, this is know what to do. If you get in a group like this, they're going to expect you to know that is not the group you want to join if you're trying to learn for the first time. And they'll probably very quickly boot you, so don't join a group like that. There's Fresh. Fresh means that this is from the very beginning. And if you're trying to learn, this is a good opportunity as long as people are willing to teach. They'll sometimes say that it requires so many clears. That means they expect people to know the activity and have had so many clears. So that's one you probably don't want to join. And then there's from a CP. CP is a checkpoint. A checkpoint is typically somewhere later in the dungeon or raid or whatever activity you're trying to do. And that basically tells you that you're only doing a portion of it. And then finally, sometimes you'll see teaching runs. If you get lucky enough to do one of those, join those because those are usually good opportunities with someone who's going to be patient. Again, feel free to join my Discord. I'm growing a community where we will do a little bit more of that. But feel free, and I love to teach people and run people through activities. The other thing is you're going to need to get a mic. Now, getting a mic, you don't need to get anything special, but you are going to have to get a mic if you want to participate in dungeons. Now, I will say, as you get better in dungeons, you can solo them, and I have been in dungeons where I did them without people on mic, but to learn, being on mic is very important. As I mentioned earlier, finding the right clan is great. Just keep in mind, with a clan, you need to make sure they're aligned to the things that you're aligned to. Know that. Some have play requirements, some don't. They just have different ways to coordinate things. Make sure getting in that you know that you're in the right clan. When you do connect with a group, just make sure you guys talk about ground rules, right? It's like your safe word, right? Make sure that you're in where people are going to be okay with teacher. Don't lie about what you know and what you don't know. That's bad to find out later in the activity when you said, hey, I know how to do this activity, and all of a sudden it's like, wait, you didn't, and you get booted. Make sure you set ground rules. If you feel like someone set ground rules and they're breaking them, like maybe it's a non-toxic run and they're starting beating up, and you just leave the activity. Don't feel pressure to keep in there because, again, they lied to you about, and that happens all the time. Make sure people know the sound of your voice and what to call you, especially if you have an unusual name. That becomes key during stressful situations. So like for me, people call me part-time. Other people, they may shorten what their name is. But the big thing is over time, knowing, if you play with the same people, is knowing what they sound like. Because at that point, it even gets easier because you don't have to say, hey, part-time. I just say something and everyone knows who I am. So once you get in a group like that, that's really good. Once you do that, once you've kind of gotten used to how you live and die, you've gotten into Legend of the Master Lost sectors, you started doing Nightfalls, you started talking to people and activities, that's where you can probably do your next step up from that. And that is exotic missions. And when I say exotic missions specifically, I'm thinking things like the 0 Hour or the Whisper, which I also have videos for. Now, the reason I bring these up are Nightfalls are great ways to kind of track and do different things. But in the end, they're still not, they don't really have encounters. You basically are stopped by, for the most part, there's a little bit of mechanics, but you're kind of stopped by champions and things like that. But you don't really have encounters. In these missions like the Whisper and the 0 Hour mission, you actually have some of the things that you will encounter within a dungeon. You'll have jumping puzzles. You'll have specific mechanics and encounters. You'll have DPS phases. So I think those are probably your next best step. And at that point, you should have found either a group that you're comfortable with, a Discord, a clan, and you can ask them to help you and start teaching you. And that's where you'll start kind of getting the cadence of how some of this stuff works, getting used to jumping puzzles, because jumping puzzles are huge parts of Raid, believe it or not. I know it's not Mario Kart, but that is what it is. But play those, and once you get comfortable with those, right, At that point, it's probably good. And even before then, you might at that point been comfortable getting the dungeons, but I just think the exotic missions, they don't have quite as heavy mechanics sometimes as something you would have in a dungeon. Finally, it's time to do your first dungeon. Now, you can do this a couple ways. You can go in and decide to do a more difficult dungeon and do it with a team. You could decide, and you could have decided this even before this, to try to do some solo. I will tell you, for instance, a dungeon like Shattered Throne or Prophecy, but especially Shattered Throne, is actually pretty easy to solo. So it just depends on your playstyle. If you want to kind of mix it up a little bit and check at the beginning like how it feels like solo, you can. Otherwise, get with your group or get with the way that you're meeting with people and get into your first dungeon. So dungeons are kind of split up. You typically have 3 or 4 encounters. There's typically going to be 2, maybe 3 DPSable bosses. It depends on the particular dungeon. And there's going to be mechanics. The mechanics built on top of them. One of the things you'll find in a dungeon is that you have mechanics that build on top of each other. So for instance, in the Prophecy dungeon, at the very beginning you get light or dark motes. In pretty much every encounter after that, you have to use light and dark motes in some way. If you go look at my Prophecy guide, you'll actually see some of that information. So what's really important is to figure out the first core mechanics. Once you do that, those core mechanics typically build on top of it. What separates a dungeon from a raid is that the mechanics are usually a little simpler. The bosses, for the most part, are a little less DPS intensive, even though some of them can be a little bit more because you only have 3 people. And that's really the basic, and it's shorter, right? So you don't have to coordinate as many people, and you also don't have to do as much DPS, and it also doesn't take as much time. In addition, like I said earlier, you're going to have several bosses. You're going to have jumping puzzles. The jumping puzzles, that's a staple of Destiny. That'll take you a little bit of time to get used to because they all have their idiosyncrasies. They'll also have secret chests. Once you're ready to do your first dungeon, I would pick some of the easy ones at the beginning, and they're kind of in tiers. So I'd say the easiest dungeons are probably your things like Shattered Throne, Prophecy. Those are probably your first 2. Pit of Heresy. Those earlier dungeons, they're actually pretty simple. And again, I have videos on my channel if you're kind of stuck and don't know the mechanics, but the core is really understanding the mechanics and working through it and starting with a simpler one. So watch videos, watch playthroughs, look for infographics. Almost all of them have an infographic with maps, and you can also check out Reddit. But just kind of get yourself comfortable. Each dungeon is going to have different mechanics, but they progressively, as you get further into Destiny, they kind of get a little more difficult. As far as loadouts, it depends on your role. Since it's 3 people have to play multiple roles sometimes. But, when you first start out, you can't take an easier role. I would take one you're comfortable with in the role that you're in, right? There are weapons they're used to using, but mix with potentially DPS. So if you're not in a DPS encounter, you can take whatever you want, obviously within reason, if you have champions and things like that to deal with. But you can take things you're more comfortable with. If you're on later encounters and you're using DPS, then you are going to have to think about what type of meta is currently going on in the game. One of the nice things about Dungeons vs. Raids, you don't have tokens as far as revive, but you do have 45 reset timers. So if, for instance, you die and it's in a bad area where no one can get to you, they're going to be down to 2 people. So surviving is important because if all 3 of you die, then you do wipe. And again, thinking about the encounters, some are more ad clear in nature, so you don't need DPS weapons. Some will have champions. You'll have to think about what things you need to stun. Some are going to have jumping puzzles, so that'll take a little while to get used to. Just take your time. I would say the other thing is make sure you set aside time. So setting aside time is really important because dungeons are simpler, and I would say, once you get a group, getting a dungeon done in 45 minutes, an hour is pretty simple, but you could take the 2-3 hours, especially the first time. So make sure you set aside time, and if you don't have time the first night, make sure you start having discussions about, well, when would we pick this up, right? Because at reset, that progress goes away, so that's within a week. Set your ground rules. Ground rules are really important. Again, it's like your safe word. Make sure everyone going in knows, like, hey, I'm new to this. Here's some of the ground rules. Make sure with that team also that that they seem like a decent group of people to be with. If they're going to be toxic and give you a hard time, just leave. There are plenty of people in Destiny. Don't feel like you have to learn from a certain set of people. There are a lot of elitists in this community who will make you feel bad because you're not good at a video game, and most of those people live in their mother's basement. Make sure you ask questions. The only question that is dumb is when it's not asked. If people make you feel bad, again, follow what I talked about before. It's a video game. If people want to expand their community, they're going to want to be able to answer questions. And, you know, you may feel dumb because something seems pretty obvious, but, you know, it's funny. I see plenty of guides out there where they miss really basic stuff. It's kind of like when you watch a YouTube video and the guy's like showing you how to fix a car, and the one part he like steps in front of the camera, like, I can't see it. It's the same thing. When people get comfortable with things, they just forget about the little details they need to tell you. Again, make sure you kind of know how the group you want to do does it. Some are more strict about how they're going to do mechanics or call outs. So be flexible and learn from them. And then maybe over time you can kind of develop your own style. But again, how people do dungeon stuff can be kind of almost a religious thing. Learn how to communicate and feel comfortable with that. Again, knowing people's voices, knowing your voice, kind of staying chill too. Like, things get stressful. There's no reason to yell or scream at people. If you're doing that, then you probably need to lead as well, right? But make sure you're being vocal when you need help. Again, it's a game. It's maybe fun. You don't need to scream and holler, but if you need help, let people know, right? People will help you out if they know like you're stuck and there's some sort of problem, you need assistance. People will definitely do that. And if they don't, again, they're jerks and you just leave. Make sure people know what you know and what you don't know. So again, that's where they're going to be able to help you, be able to get better at the game. And really, guys, that's it. If you learn how to be a good human being, if you play with people who know how to be a good human being, if you're honest about what you don't know and what you'd like to know, if you pay more attention to be survivable, if you ask good questions, if you find a good group, dungeons are literally some of the best activities in the game. And the great thing about them versus raids is you're not trying to take a small city of people and try to coordinate their schedules. You're literally talking about 3 people. And again, as you get better, you can solo them or even do them with 2 people. So again, it's much easier and it gives you a lot of the flavors, some of the best content that's in any video game, period. That's a video. If you like the video, feel free to like it, subscribe to my channel, join my Discord, and I'll see you guardians in the tower.